All right, welcome to Call Together. Today, my guest is Semira Washington. She is in Florida. Thanks for being here, Semira.
Thank you for having me.
And I will say she is my only take two guest so far. We had this huge, 45 minutes pre-live chat just because we found out we are such kindred friends. And then we had to stop by at the office. And so we had to cut it off and re-record. And so I'm sharing this because they tell you not to share those types of things. Keep it very professional. Here's the deal. If you're listening to this, you probably wear about 10 different hats and you can relate. And so this is just real life. Many of you that are watching on YouTube or listening, you are managing families and businesses and ministries. And so I'm sharing that to let you know you are not alone when you're like, hey, sorry, I have to compartmentalize just for a second. Let me switch hats and then we'll be right back. So Semira is also one of those people that has her hands and mind in a lot of different areas. And today we're actually going to hear what her marketplace business does, but also just their ministry life, parenting life, because God's heart for us is to be completely surrounded by his Holy Spirit in everything that we do. And so being a disciple of Christ is not just on Sundays. It's not just, for when you're taking your kids out and you tell them to act right, because you're a good Christian family. Don't make a fool of yourself. That is not what being a follower of Christ is about. He is all up in our business. And I could not be more thankful. And so when he gives us a call to, make disciples and to go to the nations, we don't get to tell him what box we want to put him in for our lives of where we give him permission. We do that sometimes. We shouldn't, then we repent. But the whole point is God, we've given you our lives to use whatever that looks like. And so sometimes he really does give people this grace upon their lives to serve in the marketplace and in full-time ministry and their family, which is our first full-time ministry. So Semira, tell us about radically optimized outcomes first. We're going to actually start there. Tell us what it is. And if somebody were to go to your website, what would they find when they go there?
Okay. Well, my company is called The Winning Perspective, and our tagline, our URL is radically optimized outcomes. That's my singular objective is once we change our outcomes, once we change our outlook, we can change our outcome. So when you have that perspective, and this is actually a book that is in the works, it should be done sometime mid-October, but it's called The Winning Perspective. And it just explains that we think there is one perspective that is going to cause us to win, and it's not. It's this perspective that is fluid. It's constantly growing. It's dynamic. It's expansive. It's collaborative. If we lived a life like as an island to ourselves, we would never see everything we need to see. Our perspective becomes what it needs to be when we connect with each other. And when we have all these different experiences, even the adversities, all they do is serve us to expand our perspective and launch us forward. So this business is built out of that. Some people start their company because they want to solve a problem in society, which is what I coach and what we should do. But I kind of create as a natural byproduct of existing. Yes. I create out of compulsion.
And also, before we went pre-live, we realized this is also why we are kindred sisters. Okay. Yes. We're we'd be doing this stuff just for us because it's how we exist. So yes, go right ahead. Please continue.
So when I get to connect with clients and they share their dreams with me or their idea for their company, and some of them are pre-existing and some of them are startups, I love being able to just take those raw materials, pull their purpose out of that and say, okay, this is a strategy for getting you seen in the marketplace. This is how we're going to optimize your search engine. This is how we're going to just completely radically optimize all the outcomes for your company. And I love it.
So I love also that you're helping them with vision casting. Like you are,
Yes.
it's well-rounded, but also the practical. So if someone said, okay, I feel like I have this idea that would really serve people because we're all called to be servants. But I don't know how to get the verbiage exactly right to share that vision with other people and then to put the legs to it to mobilize that vision. And those are the things
Yes.
that you're really able to help them with from A to Z to, it's like well-rounded coaching. It's not just
Exactly.
SEO optimization, but it's like, let me coach you on even getting to that point, really, and not giving up once you're
Yes.
past that point, because that's easy to want to do.
Absolutely.
That's very easy to
Exactly.
want to do. So we're going to talk about all the different hats that you wear. And also, I'm going to put up on the screen. So if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook Live or one of our websites, you are seeing on your screen right now how to connect with Semira at their website at radicallyoptimizedoutcomes.com. If you are listening on iTunes or your podcast provider, you'll be able to catch all of this in your show notes as well so that you're not having to quickly jot it down. Just check out the notes and they'll be in there. Okay, so tell us, so that's your marketplace hat that you're wearing and serving in that area. You also have a podcast. So let's just talk about that a minute. So you also have a podcast, which is another avenue of influence that you get to share. So tell us just a little bit about that.
So this podcast is like a baby. This is part of a project that I've worked on pretty much my entire life. So many years of research, so many hours of interviews, so many case studies, as well as my own life and people that I coach and counsel and that sort of thing. But everyone has someone in their life who's that person that just does not make sense. The person who is a divergent thinker, they're kind of outcast, or they live on the fringe, or whatever you want to call it. Anthropologically, these people would be your nomads, the people who don't necessarily fit into societal norms. A subculture of that would be part of the homeless population, where, a lot of people judge them and say, okay, well, why can't they just get a job or whatever? They were never created for 9 to 5. And there's so many of us that were not created for a 9 to 5. So I am writing a book. It's called The Lover's Manual. And it's basically like a car manual. It's a how-to manual on how to get the best results out of these people, how to inspire them to be their best, how to understand them. So there's a chapter on diagnostics. You can look at and say, okay, if they're doing this, then that's probably an indicator of this. Like when you're driving a car and that indicator light comes on, like you've got to get an oil change.
Yes.
We don't have those indicator lights as people. And so, and then, different vehicles function differently. A Prius is not going to function the same way a Tesla will. And so we treat people like we're all the same make and model, and we're not. There are some people who are created for high performance. They're a high performance vehicle with crazy horsepower under the hood. And there's some people who are meant to take life in the slow lane, and that's fine. And so this podcast is all about that. It's about decoding these mysterious people in your life. And you may be that person, as I am in my case. You may have married that person, which I also did. And you may have given birth to those people, which we also did. And then I was also raised by that person. So I have a lot of personal experience in the book. And most of the people that God just connects me with are those people who are like, I don't understand my kid. They just don't make sense to me whatsoever. I've tried everything. I'm exhausted. They're exhausted. And I'm just like, there's nothing wrong with your child. They're just wired differently. And then I take them through the roadmap and I'm like, this is how you do it. This is how you understand them. And it just completely bridges the gap. And it helps that person who spent their whole life being misunderstood understand that there's a reason they were wired that way, that they are not broken, that they are not a lemon, that all they need is to be operating under the, manufacturer's indications.
Right, which is how God created them. I think as well that just because whether it is our Western culture, whether it is just honestly pure selfishness, because we are all selfish and we have to submit what we want, obviously, to the will of God and to put on his fruit of the Spirit to get rid of that. But it is a daily challenge. So we want to look more like Christ today than yesterday. And I think that when we look at our families and just how we raise our kids, that we do want them to act and react how we want them to act and react, that one that we're comfortable with, one that we know how to handle, because we don't like to be out of control or not in charge. You know what I mean? And so this whole thing, and you can start to become the warden of your house, wanting people to conform instead of being disciple makers in your house. And it can happen so very, very quickly. And one of the things that I talk about, even with our fruit bearing family membership and just podcast there, is that sometimes we forget that our family unit is really the church. Parents are leading a church, whether they feel like they're leading a church or not, where two or more are gathered. They are called to raise up their children just in the heart of God. And it starts like, it's a parent responsibility of obedience. It has nothing to do with how well your kids behave or if they listen. You do it as a disciple of Christ, like this obedience thing that starts to happen. And so then when you take all of these verses in scripture about the beauty of different gifts, and you relate that to your family and your children, you're like, I'm so thankful they're wired different than me, because they're bringing a different perspective to the table that I would miss out on the beauty of how they see things, even if it's so very different. Because really, parenting is God's gift of letting you see, well, disciple making in general is God's gift of letting you see lives changed and see people from his perspective. So exactly what you're saying, like this whole manual of, you know what, maybe you're not a Tesla, but you know, what level are you performing at? And it doesn't make the person less than. It just means that they have a different area of influence or a different view. And there's really beauty when it all works together, because our family should operate as the church where people are complementary with their gifts and not in competition. And I think that we lose that even in families. We think that there's a competition, that as a parent, I have to win this battle. No. We actually want God's heart to win this battle, not me. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And sometimes as a parent, it's our attitude that is actually the problem, not our kids' responses. Yes. You know what I mean? And then when you get that, you're like,
so much.
I have to apologize to my child because I thought they were being so strong-willed, but really, I was not parenting with discipleship in mind. I was parenting to win in mind, which is that like fine tuning of, so I love the analogies that you have used with the car manuals, because it's so true. And God wrote each one of our manuals because he divinely made us. So even if we're raising up our kids and they haven't even made a decision to follow Christ yet, you still are discipling them before they even make that decision. Jesus did. He discipled people before they ever chose to follow him or not, because he was doing that, like laying that foundation in faith. So I love exactly what you were talking about. And so you guys homeschool your kids.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the journey of homeschooling and really raising, you know, young people that are going to be adults, because when we're parenting, we're raising adults, right? We're not just raising kids, like we're raising adults, the end in mind of having that entrepreneurial, you know, kingdom, big church mindset, meaning that we are the church. How does that affect how you homeschool? Like knowing that that's how, like not only how you're wired, but really it's a very kingdom perspective of what that looks like. So how do you put all that together in their homeschooling?
That's an awesome question. And where we're at today is a result of growth and several iterations going through the process, designing, redesigning, throwing everything out of the window and starting over again, and a lot of experimentation. So it's literally taking that entrepreneur mindset and just bringing it home. And in the beginning, I struggled because I thought I was supposed to do what everyone else did. And back then, there weren't a lot of models for homeschooling. Okay. So, and we struggled, and they didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it. And then I started to be like, you know what? I have to do this my way, which is the conclusion I come to with everything. And it's not that I don't have this desire to live outside of the box like some people do. I
Right.
can't find the box. And so
Right.
I
It's
have to
not
just
out of
create my
rebellion, it's
own
out of
thing.
necessity. Right. It's like I'm not trying to be a rebel
Yes,
or prideful that I know
yes,
everything. This is not working. Like, this is not God's heart for my house. I feel like the prison warden. This is not okay.
yes,
Yeah, I love it. So now that you have sort of really thrown off what everybody else says works and said, okay, God, show me what works for us. And that really is gleaning from other people, but not having
yes,
this like thing that you have to cookie cutter it the
exactly.
way. And we see that with the disciples, even though they followed Jesus, right? They each had their own personalities and their own way of doing things. And even when he interacted with them and they interacted with each other, it was very personalized. What fit with John did not fit with Peter.
Yes,
That they clashed. There were some pride issues on Peter's part, but Jesus met them where they're at. And really with homeschooling, just like parenting, you're meeting your children where they're at. And have you found having four that what works for one is not the cookie cutter answer for the other ones?
absolutely. And so sometimes people will ask me, so what's your homeschool model? And some people do Charlotte Mason, some people do this and that. Like,
Sure.
well, it's kind of like a tech startup in Silicon Valley. That's the best way I can explain it.
Yeah, and if something isn't working well, you're like, at least my kids are getting the experience of being brave enough to try new things and admit when something's not working,
Yeah,
which is leadership development in its own way. I mean, so they're
yeah,
learning that it's okay to reroute when you need to. Um, which I think sometimes people don't like to reroute because it's admitting that they failed, which is pride kind of
I'm so
repackaged.
okay with failure because
Right. Yeah.
yes,
Yes. It's like the John Maxwell saying, like, fail forward. Do you know what I mean? Like, at least you're going somewhere. If you
yes,
fail, like,
yes,
fail doing something, like, fail forward, like, go to your next thing. Because you're not ever really failing, you're just growing. And it's like this whole mindset thing that
exactly.
begins to happen and that you're able to give to your kids. You want them to have stories like, yeah, we tried this. It was horrible. That doesn't make you a horrible parent or a horrible
Yes,
homeschool mom or dad. It just means it was horrible. Just factually, this did not work well.
exactly.
Did not work well. And it's what we do in our businesses. Do you know what I mean? Like you run all of these like charts and this worked well or this didn't work well. And we seem to be okay with that more than taking the same type of approach with our family.
Exactly. And ministry.
Yes, and in ministry, because it's funny how you can get more defensive in parenting and ministry
Yes.
than in the marketplace, which is so funny because you would think, oh, those are like more humble and teachable parts of your heart. But
You think?
but it's not. You're right. I mean, you would totally, that God's heart is for it to be, but we just kind of hold on to those and get really defensive. And so
Yes.
would you agree that if you were parenting, whether it's homeschooling or traditional schooling in general, you cannot get defensive. You need to submit to God's heart. I mean, in a very
Yes.
simple like sentence. Would you agree with that?
I would agree wholeheartedly. And the thing is, he understands the beginning from the end. He
Yeah.
knows that if I make this choice, this is going to be the outcome 15 years down the road. And
Mm.
so it's like if we just follow his instructions, follow his way of doing it, and don't put him in a box, because really when he moved out of the Ark of the Covenant, he gave up boxes for good.
Yes. Yes. Thankfully so. Yes. So tell us a little bit about, so we've talked about, and we're going to come back to the winning perspective here in a moment. And we talked about the podcast that you're doing and the book that you're writing, Homeschooling. And let's talk about church life. So you and your husband also are associate pastors at your church. Tell us what each of you do there. And really, then you can just kind of segue into the advice you would give to people that are wearing multiple hats, the marketplace, the full-time ministry, raising kids, homeschooling, and just really about the advice that you would give when people say, well, don't you think that that is just too much? And just, we talked a little bit before we went live on the air about, because each of us have had people tell us that. And sometimes there really is some, you have mentors in your life that they understand you, they know what mode you're operating in, and they're praying alongside of you. But then some people give advice saying you're doing too much because their owner's manual is a little different. That they're not the Tesla that's ready to and so they're giving it from advice from a good place of because they love you, but they don't know how you were designed, so to speak. And so it does give this weird clashing sometimes from a very good place, and it gives like this conflict. So tell us about what you guys do at the church, and then just speak into that about for those people that say, I'm one of those people that I kind of have my hands in a lot and it works for me, but other people give me different advice. So just share your thoughts on all that.
Okay. Well, so my husband and I, first of all, if you like get into our heart, we love missions. So we love just like nations. We love different cultures. Our kids are each learning like 2 different languages. Like we just love people. We love the differences in people. And so that's where our heart is, but we also love the local church. And we never wanted to choose one over the other. We wanted to love them both equally. Like you have more than one kid and you love them both. That's how we feel about missions and the local church and business and entrepreneurship. And so we love supporting our pastors. Our pastors are amazing people, and they're also multi-potentialites. So like you could come to church today and 2 weeks from now, like the backdrop is completely different. They've rebuilt out this section. Like they're always improving and expanding and growing. And so they nurture that in us, and we love that.
Yes.
And they give us the freedom to be who we are and to do what we do the way that we do it. And all of that is understood in the order of they are the authority, which I love, because we were campus pastors at one point. And it's just a different level of you're responsible for everything and they're responsible for everything and you get to support them.
Yes.
So I am enjoying this season.
Absolutely.
And so I am the children's pastor. My husband is an associate pastor, and we basically do whatever they ask. Whatever is needed at the time. We lead on the prayer call and prayer groups. We lead small group. We have one coming up. I'm leading on discipleship, and then my husband's doing one on healing after any sort of hurt or devastation in your life. And so we just love the local church. We love her function in the world and in society. And when she's healthy, everything else kind of functions better. And so from that, yes, we have had advice about you're doing too much, especially as a mom. I've had people caution me all the time, like your children are going to suffer, this and that. And so I had seasons where I was like, okay, I'm just going to focus on this. I was miserable. I was like dying inside.
Yes.
And my kids were suffering. My husband was suffering. And when the whole reference to cars, I love cars, just as an aside, but we had an opportunity to test drive a Tesla, and they have the different modes. They have the like the sport mode, they have just like the everyday going down the street mode, whatever they call it, and then they have ludicrous mode. We kind of multi-potentialites. We live in ludicrous mode. Like we don't know how.
It's our happy place. It is our happy place. It's actually where we thrive the best.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a hard thing to understand if you're not wired that way, which is why it's important for us to be, now that, we want to have diversity. We usually limit that to gender and in ethnicity. You want to have men and women, you want to have different ethnicities. We have to have that diversity of thought. And if we don't have that, we really cannot have a healthy perspective as an individual, as a family, as a community, as an organization, or as a church. And so we really just have to have that. And so the grace for that definitely comes from God. because I couldn't do it apart from him. I could see areas that I would have struggled in had I not had that grace to fall back on. And
Mhm.
then we're also raising multi potentialites, and so we encourage them, like, this is how God wired you to do all the things, to learn about all the things. So we they technically have grades, but we don't limit them in terms of what they can learn.
Right.
So our oldest daughter, she's very like driven. She's very self-motivated. And so I said, you know what? I said, look, these are all my textbooks from college. These are, curriculum all the way up to high school. She would take her history book, a textbook, and read it like a novel. So this child would just crush a textbook in like a week. And
Right.
it's literally like feeding a wood chipper. We cannot keep enough books in our home. So we took the limits off. And they'll see
Yes.
me working, doing web design, designing a client's website, and they're like, "How do you do that?" So my 11-year-old, I said, "Sit down, sign up. Let's just walk through it." And he just mastered it. Like, he just
Mhm.
totally understood it, and it crushes it. He built his own website. So then he's like, "Hey, sis, you want me to build your website?" And it's like, I don't limit what they can learn or what they can understand. So we teach them all about entrepreneurship. Their part of their curriculum is investing, managing money, how to start a company, how to start a YouTube channel, how to brand your business. Like, and so
Mm.
now they're helping their friends and counterparts. They're like, "Hey, you're really a good artist. Let me help you start a YouTube channel." And I love it.
It is. It's so good. And it goes back to that whole thing that you're raising adults.
Yeah.
You are not raising an 11-year-old. And there's something that sort of shifts because, especially in a Western society, and this is just my viewpoint, is that, again, from a good place, that we don't want to see, our kids struggle, of how, people have had to struggle in the past. And so out of this heart of wanting to protect, we actually limit. We actually limit
Yes.
in trying to say, well, you need to enjoy your childhood, or we just want to put them in this little safety box, when really
Mm-hmm.
part of enjoying childhood is them being who they were created to be. And we
Yes.
tamper down their way of thinking. And I thought, well, if God gave us a creative mind, I mean, he created the world out of nothing. He's creative. We know this. That why would we want to hinder young people in particular? And I think that, not to like over spiritualize it, but I really do feel that we see so much in scripture where God used young people, how he used
Yes.
Samuel at such a young age. All of his disciples, if
Mm-hmm.
you look through scripture based on the data that we have in scripture, they were young people. Peter was married. The rest, I mean, we're talking young teenage, young adults that he called up. And so he didn't say, like, where are your
Yeah.
50-year-olds who think they know everything? He's like, give me the ones that still have passion. Do you know what I
Yes.
mean? And so I've already got in my brain,
Yes.
and I tell people this all the time. I have chosen to be a spunky 80-year-old if God chooses that I can still be on earth at 80. And they're like, why are you thinking
Same.
that far ahead? Because
Same.
choose this day who you will serve. I choose Jesus every day. And I
Yeah.
choose not to become that bitter person, or this lazy person, or this just like counting down till I die person. Because there's still things that can be done. And so I love getting to talk to people that are starting new businesses at 70 because they've retired from something else. And
Me
they're like, I
too.
still got
Yes.
plenty to give. And I want 11-year-olds, like you're saying, like that 11-year-old to be 70 going, let's do something new to serve people. Like, that is a lifestyle, not an
Yes.
age box. And so, and I know you shared earlier too about like those boxes, and we talked about this off air too, but we, whether it's the church or just us as believers, we try to put God in all these little check boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have society, even secular society, trying to put young people in check boxes.
Yep.
And there is such freedom when you just throw all those out of the window and you're like, your will be done, not mine. If we just like follow Jesus's example, like, you know what? Yeah,
Yes.
your will be done, not mine. It's so freeing, which is why
It is.
homeschool now is fun for you, because you chucked out
Yes.
all of the expectations that everybody else had for you. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And sometimes we I don't know. I think we make other people's expectations our idols without realizing it, because we thought, well,
Yeah.
okay, it's good to be mentored and it's scriptural to have mentors in your life. I mean, it talks about older women raising younger women. It's very
Mm-hmm.
God's heart. It's discipleship, but it can get, that there's enough truth in it. It almost sounds like God's heart, but it actually isn't. It's just good people's good intentions.
Yes.
That sort
Yes.
of cloud that. So I
Exactly.
love what you're doing with your kids. Our son started like his own businesses. I mean, he was young, he started eBay business at 14, like just crazy things that you're
Awesome.
like, well, did you teach them? Nope. We just said, hey, that's a great idea. How can we support you? And the beautiful thing I
Yes.
love too is about your son asking you a question and then you saying, well, pull up a chair. And then he took it from there because he wants to learn and being
Yep.
that self learner. And I think for parents that are listening, that one of the things that I believe that we both would say is if you don't set up this culture of nurturing their wanting to learn, then what happens is they quit asking questions. They
Yes.
quit asking questions.
Yes.
And then you have this older teenager, and you're like, well, they don't talk. They don't let me into their life. And as parents, we have to take responsibility. And this isn't
Yes.
to be critical. This is just say, hey, let's change this. That we have actually, in trying to make do or make our to do list, we've actually, us as the leaders of the home, closed the door on making it this culture of normal of asking questions and being learners instead of check boxers. Do you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And so would you agree with that?
Yes, exactly. I would agree
Um,
with that so much. And you said something about, can you hear me?
yes, 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 you're good.
Okay. You said something about Jesus and disciples. And so the book I just published a couple days ago, perhaps, um I was talking about how we look at the church like it's this priceless artifact, and it was really this crazy radical startup. And Jesus was this social entrepreneur. He's breaking down all these cultural barriers.
Yes.
He's actually, people say, well, was Jesus for social justice? Yeah, he totally
Right.
was like, I don't care if you're a Samaritan, I don't care if you're a woman, I'm going to talk to you and I'm going to help you get to that next level in your life. I'm going to help you 100x your whole life. And
Yes.
he didn't care. He didn't care about societal norms. He was like, I've got a service, I'm out here to deliver it, and here's this woman here, and I'm not going to wait for my disciples to get back. I'm just going to change your life. And so, it's the same thing with raising kids. When you raise them with that perspective, like, you're not born with limitations, so why pick
Mhm.
them up as you go along? And I'm 42 this birthday. I've spent so much of my life having to unlearn how to fit into
Yes.
society. And I never
Mhm.
fit. I mean, if you just really think about it, I never fit. Any sort of
Yep.
box I was in, it was uncomfortable, it was exhausting, it was frustrating. And 98% of my stress in life came from the boxes.
Mhm.
Whether it was trying to look at the box,
Yes.
because people are like, oh, think outside the box. I'm like, where's the box? Like, can someone show me the box?
Yes. Yes. I so love
And
it.
so, our kids, we just gave them permission to be who God made them, who they are, and they're so fulfilled. And so, when people are like, well, why do you homeschool? It started out just because I felt like that was what the Lord said. I didn't understand it. I didn't want to. But
Yeah.
as we went on, I was like, they're so fulfilled in life. They're living their best life. They can do all the things they want to do whenever they want to do it.
And I think too that in having that as a lifestyle, that is something you want them to continue, like we said, into adulthood, that you don't have to choose. And so many times people will say, like what you said, your kids are going to suffer if you do all of these things and all of this. And I think that the enemy loves when we buy into the Kool-Aid that your kids only need you in one
Yes.
area. And so don't show them all the things God
Yep.
has put in you. Let's just keep you in one lane. Because really, as Christ followers, like we are warriors in the kingdom. So if we can just have our wings clipped a little bit to where we just stay not quite as effective, and we can't cause as much
Yes.
havoc, because
Yes.
really everything we're doing is kingdom. Like, so even when we are, dealing with people that disagree with us or whatever it might be, the Bible is so clear. Like, you are not fighting flesh and blood. Like, not one person,
Mm-hmm.
even if they say they're your enemy, they are not. It is principalities. There is
Exactly.
this spiritual war going on. And we forget that we, in our discipleship, like, part of your kids being everything they are called to be is influence that they will have in more areas to reflect God's heart to the world, and to have
Yes.
regular everyday conversations. And I think that sometimes when people are in mainstream ministry mindsets, whether they're just attending a church or they're in full-time ministry, what can end up happening is they start compartmentalizing. Well, evangelism is what we take the church out on a Saturday outreach day, and then through the week, we go through our thing, and then on Sunday we invited someone to church. That's evangelism, right? But nobody's actually shared Jesus. Like, you can do that. Like, you can't outsource that to your pastor. Like, you're totally allowed to talk to them before you even bring them, to church. It's like so weird. That's a whole other topic for another day. But in saying that, it's this weird thing that we think that our mission field is whatever spiritual gifts that we got on a spiritual gift test, and we could only use those inside of the church, and not like, that whole influence. So I'm thinking of your 11-year-old. Wow, the influence with his friends of, let me help you with a YouTube channel. Even if his friends are unbelievers, his kindness, which is also God's kindness that draws us to repentance, but just reflecting God's heart of servitude, of saying, let me help you. In the marketplace, we are called to serve just how we are inside of church. So to raise kids like that, I mean, that's just kingdom powerhouse stuff there. One of the things that we're also going to put down in our notes as we just jump around here just a little bit is you want to offer a discount to anybody that's going to be watching this on YouTube or Facebook or our website, or listening later on our podcast as well, about web and graphic design service that you do. So tell us again a little bit about what that looks like. And now I'm thinking, wow, you're going to have a new business partner with your 11-year-old. He's like all over it. You're like, this is a family business. This is so good. So just tell us like the service part of what you provide for people in that vein.
Okay. It's really practical, but it is sort of a one-stop shop. So if you need a website, we create them from scratch. If you want your website reconfigured, we can also redesign it and do the layout and everything like that. Set you up for e-commerce, design a logo, help you come up with a tagline, help you secure your URL, like every single part of it, getting you listed on Yelp, just all of the different details coming together. So web design, graphic design, logo, brand solutions, the whole package.
Well, and what I love too is so people can have you really coach them through the process, so they could have you in that area of their life. And instead of going, okay, well, great, you know what, Semira and her husband, this is really good. We've got this coaching thing. She's going to help coach me through all of this. But now I have all this other stuff that stresses me out, which is the practical SEO. Like, some people are thinking, I don't even know what that means. Great. You don't really have to know what it means, because she can help you. And so instead of them having to stop in 5 places, it is a one-stop shop. So they can get that mentoring coaching happening. But also help putting the feet to that vision to get it out there to serve their audience, which I absolutely love, love, love. And so if you are really just resonating with some things that Semira is talking about and maybe you're one of those people that say, you know what, we're doing this whole pastoring thing. We have our kids. We also have a business that we're trying to get up off the ground. Having someone like her coach you means that she gets it, that she's not going to put you in a box. She's like, I totally understand. And how do we make this work? And I would think too, that as you're coaching them, you would also be helping them with simplification so that they can live the best life of doing all the things that they're called to do without getting overwhelmed with things that really could be a whole lot of a more simple process. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that completely. We were talking about the gifts that our kids have and how God wires us. Part of the way He wired me, and again, when I was younger, the frustration because I tried to function in a traditional, typical way, but
Yeah.
I'm equally logical as I am creative. So
Yes,
while
we
I'm
are
this
so meant to be
crazy
friends for life.
dreamer,
Yes, we are meant to be friends for life.
yes. So while I'm this crazy dreamer, I never dream without action. So I'll sit and I'll daydream about this amazing thing or this creative endeavor, and then I've got to have those action steps. And so when I'm coaching clients, that's exactly what we do. We just merge those two parts together. We say, okay, this is your dream, this is your vision. These are the practical steps you take to get there. This is awesome. We're just going to put this over here on this side. And so this is going to be your first step. We're going to put these in order and just walk through the process.
I absolutely love it. And so if somebody is listening or watching this, what advice would you give them? What encouragement would you give them if they are at the starting point of jumping off the cliff of faith, so to speak, to, they're at the cliff. They're like, I need to take this jump into, becoming an entrepreneur. What advice would you give them or encouragement would you give them to, take the plunge?
So in terms of taking the plunge, anytime that people spend millions of dollars in the industry of self-help and all that kind of thing, if you took everything that everybody said and you boiled it down,
Yep.
everything is still going to require action. So my
Mhm.
number one advice is take massive action. And massive action, it looks different for each person. So for some people, that's just getting your website started. That's literally just taking that step. It's massive action because it's held you back for 8 years. Sometimes
Right.
it's, you know, taking that step of getting on social media. And for someone else, that could be a little tiny step, but for you, it's massive because it's this huge fear that you have. And so that's definitely it. And then part of that is just your business, your dream is only going to grow at the rate that you develop. So
Mhm.
spend most of your time developing yourself. That includes meditating on God's word. That includes spending time in prayer. That includes connecting with like-minded believers. But it also includes podcasts, books. Like if you guys saw our library as a family, like we're crazy with books. And then we've got audiobooks. And it's like, I hate doing domestic things. I hate washing dishes. I hate doing laundry. So to like trick myself into it, I'm putting on, a
Yes,
podcast. I'm listening to an audio course. Like,
yes. I knew that's where you're going to go with that because I'm like, yeah, we have like our headphones, and I'm like, I could multitask because I need to use this time wisely.
exactly.
Yes, I
Yeah,
can use this time wisely. And I think just piggybacking what you said is that you have to be brave enough to be a doer. And,
exactly.
James talks about, faith without works is dead. If you don't put actions to your dreams, you're just talking it to death. And
Yes,
sometimes we talk it to death, and it just stays there as a story, not as an
exactly.
actual reality. And I think that we've all had those moments, whether it's fear or insecurity or just not managing our time well. I mean, the list is long of what could be preventing you, but it really is being brave enough to
Hmm.
overcome those things to say, you
Yes.
know what, now is the time. And you see all the little memes and all the inspirational things that, your choices today, basically are affecting your tomorrow. And that really puts it
Hmm.
into perspective of, the John Maxwell saying, actually, no, I think it was Zig Ziglar that said insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. It's like the old sales books. It was in an
Yes.
old sales book. And it's so true. We're like, you know what, one day something's going to change. And tomorrow you're still saying one day, like
Yep.
eventually the day has to come that you actually put action to make the one day come true.
Yes.
So I love what you're saying. So, can people get links to the book that you did publish and the one that you will be publishing? Can they get that from your website as well?
Because it like just happened, I need to update the website.
So
But
if
they
you're
am on
watching this
Amazon.
later,
So
then yes, it is coming to your website, though, that you'll have a link on there, right?
I will. My husband's I love him so much, and I'm so thankful that he just supports my craziness and my just fury of creativity. Because it's like one week I'm like, hey, I need to write this book, and then he's like, oh, it's already published. Okay, great.
Yeah, because we need it out of our heads. We need it out on paper. Yeah, we need it
Exactly.
out of our heads.
Yes. Yes.
So, and then can they opt into an email list with you as well if they go to your website
Yes.
so that they can keep up with your
Absolutely.
crazy, right? Because people need to keep up with our crazy on what we're
I love
doing.
that. They can keep up with my crazy.
I'm just like, come
Yes.
on with us.
Yes.
It's a fun place to be. It is a fun place to be. All right. So,
It is.
it really is. I'm just telling you. So, if you would like to keep up with Semira and just, not just her crazy, but her family's crazy on their journey of just following God's roadmap for them, which is what I love, and that they can help you on your journey. Please check out radicallyoutcomes.com. You also can go there and you can find info about her podcast and some other things that she'll keep adding. And I would just encourage you that whether it's Semira that's sharing with us today about the winning perspective or other guests that have been on a call together, bookmark their websites so that because it's so easy to say, oh, I love that. And then you sort of forget over time to keep going back. So get on their email lists, bookmark their pages so that you can go and just glean from kingdom-minded people that are right where you're at, or they've been where you're at, and they can just encourage you just to be brave on your endeavor. So whether it's raising your kids, entrepreneurship, ministry, just do life with the people that we've had here on the show. All right, Semira, thank you so much for being on here today. I've had so much fun today. I'm glad we've got to talk so much before we ever
Me
went
too.
live, and that we'll get to stay
Yes.
connected. All right, friends, live well. You need to lead well. And also for you that are parenting, lead well with your parenting too. And just remember, God has entrusted you with these young people that you are raising to be adults, including if they are 1 or they're 17 right now. You're raising kingdom adults, which is a really beautiful thing. All right, until next time, friends.